My name's Mia, I'm 27, and I've spent my life feeling like a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit. I grew up in a quaint little town in Colorado Springs, Colorado, with my adoptive parents, Karen and David, and my older brother, Ethan, who's 30. Our family home was a cozy two-story with a wraparound porch, filled with the scent of Karen's homemade apple pie and the sound of David's old radio playing country tunes. They were loving. Karen taught me to sketch wildflowers in the backyard, and David took me fishing at a nearby lake every summer, his laughter echoing across the water. But even with all that warmth, I felt different. Karen has fair skin and blonde curls, David has a broad frame and sandy hair, and Ethan mirrors them perfectly with his blue eyes and freckles. Me. I've got olive skin, wavy chestnut hair that falls past my shoulders, and deep brown eyes that stand out like a sore thumb. Strangers would joke, "You must be the mailman's kid," and my parents would chuckle, saying I took after a distant aunt I'd never met. That difference gnawed at me as I grew up. My adoption story was no secret. Karen and David found me abandoned at a Denver hospital as a newborn, wrapped in a tattered blue blanket with a note pinned to it, "Please love her. Her name is Mia." No other clues, no trace of my biological parents. I'd stare into mirrors, tracing the lines of my face, wondering if my real mom had the same hair or if my dad had the same quiet smile I sometimes caught in my reflection. Last year, after landing a graphic design job in Seattle and moving into a tiny apartment with a view of the Puget Sound, I felt a surge of courage. The new city, with its misty mornings and bustling streets, inspired me to finally chase the answer to that lifelong question. Who am I? I started with an adoption reunion registry, filling out forms with shaky hands, then ordered a 23andMe DNA kit, imagining I'd uncover a quirky lineage, maybe some Italian ancestors or a Native American thread. My parents were supportive but cautious when I told them, Karen's eyes misting over as she said, "We just want you to be happy, sweetheart, but what if it hurts?" David nodded, adding, "Some doors are better left closed." I promised I'd be fine, though my stomach churned with anticipation. Weeks later, the results pinged my inbox, and I nearly dropped my coffee. The report showed no significant DNA match with Karen or David, only a distant 12.5% with Ethan, like a cousin, not a sibling. My hands trembled as I reread it, my mind racing. A glitch? A mistake? I laughed nervously, but a chill settled in my chest. That night, as I sat by my window watching the rain streak the glass, I heard a faint whisper, like a breath against my ear, saying my name. I shook it off as the wind, but it was the start of something I couldn't unhear. I couldn't stop thinking about the DNA results. I called 23andMe, my voice cracking as I asked about errors, but the rep was firm. "Our tests are 99.9% accurate, ma'am. You might want to consider a second test or family discussion." I ordered another kit, this time secretly swabbing Karen, David, and Ethan, labeling them with fake names to avoid suspicion. I mailed them off, my heart pounding, and waited, the suspense eating at me. At home, I watched my family closely during our next video call. Karen fidgeted with her necklace, avoiding my gaze when I mentioned the test. David cleared his throat, launching into a story about work, and Ethan just smirked, saying, "You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Mia." The second results arrived, confirming the first. Karen and David shared a 50% match with Ethan, marking them as his parents, but my sample showed only a 25% match with Ethan, half-sibling territory, and no direct link to them. I felt a wave of nausea. That night, I called Laura Bennett, the closest DNA match from the first test, a woman in San Diego. Her voice was soft, hesitant, as she said, "I think I might be your mother. I gave up a girl in Denver 27 years ago." My breath caught. She was 18 then, a college student pressured by her strict parents to give me up. We talked for hours, about her love for painting, my graphic design career, the way we both hummed when we were nervous. She sent a photo, a woman with my wavy chestnut hair and brown eyes, her smile trembling with emotion. I cried, clutching the phone, feeling a connection I'd never known. We planned to meet in person. I booked a flight to San Diego, my mind a whirlwind of hope and dread. What if she rejected me? What if she had secrets? My parents were supportive but anxious, Karen whispering, "Be careful, honey. Some truths hurt." The night before my flight, as I packed, the whispers returned, faint, insistent, calling Mia from the shadows of my apartment. I checked the locks, telling myself it was the creaky building, but the unease lingered. I landed in San Diego on a warm April morning, the salty breeze and palm trees a stark contrast to Seattle's gray. Laura's house was a charming bungalow in a quiet neighborhood, its garden bursting with daisies and a porch swaying gently in the breeze. She opened the door, her eyes widening as she saw me. "You're beautiful," she breathed, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. We stood there, tears streaming, our faces mirror images, same high cheekbones, same slight dimple on the left. I felt a rush of warmth, like a missing piece of my soul had snapped into place. We spent the day together, sipping iced tea on her porch, flipping through her old sketchbooks filled with vibrant landscapes, and laughing over her terrible cooking stories. She showed me a photo album, pointing to pictures of herself at 18, pregnant with me, her eyes filled with a mix of joy and fear. "I fought to keep you," she said, her voice breaking, "but my parents said I'd ruin my life. They arranged the adoption." I squeezed her hand, my heart aching for her. That evening, we made spaghetti with sauce from a jar, her attempt at cooking, and I felt a bond forming, like we'd always been part of each other's lives. But something felt off. When I asked about my father, Laura's smile faded. "He's complicated," she mumbled, her hands trembling as she cleared the table. I noticed a locked drawer in her desk, and when I reached for it, she gently pushed my hand away, her face tense. That night, in the guest room with its soft blue walls and quilted bed, I heard a creak outside, slow, deliberate, like footsteps on gravel. I peeked through the curtains, my pulse racing, but saw only the moonlit yard, shadows dancing with the swaying palms. The whispers returned, closer now, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching us. Laura had to work a morning shift at the hospital, leaving me alone in her house. My curiosity got the better of me. I rummaged through her kitchen drawers, finding a small brass key taped under a cookbook. With trembling hands, I unlocked the desk drawer, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. They were addressed to Laura from a man named Daniel, written 28 years ago, filled with passionate declarations and desperate pleas. "My love, we'll escape them soon," one read. "Keep our baby safe. Never tell anyone." Another warned, "If they find us, it's over." The final letter, dated a month before my birth, ended with, "I'll protect you both, or die trying." My mind spun. Who was Daniel? My father? Who were they? I heard Laura's car pull up and quickly hid the letters, my heart pounding. When she walked in, I couldn't hold back. I held up the key, my voice shaking. "Who's Daniel? What are you hiding?" Her face drained of color, and she sank onto the couch, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Daniel was your father," she confessed. "He was tangled with a crime syndicate in Denver, smuggling, money laundering. We planned to run, but they threatened us. I gave you up to save you." She begged me to stop digging, her eyes wide with fear, but the mystery only deepened. That night, the whispers grew into a low hum, seeping through the walls, and I saw a shadow move past the window. The next few days were tense. Laura was a nervous wreck, peeking through curtains, jumping at every sound. I noticed a black sedan parked down the street, its tinted windows glinting in the sun, always there when we left the house. One afternoon, as we walked to a seaside cafe, I spotted a man across the road, tall, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, his gaze fixed on us. Laura grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Don't look," she hissed, pulling me into an alley. We rushed home, and she double-locked the doors, her breathing ragged. "They've found us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The syndicate never forgets." That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers were a chorus now, echoing through the house, and a tapping started at my window, soft at first, then insistent. I crept downstairs, gripping a kitchen knife, my bare feet cold on the tile. Through the glass, I saw a figure, tall, cloaked in shadow, its face obscured, staring with unblinking eyes. I screamed, dropping the knife, and Laura rushed in, flipping on every light. The figure vanished, but a note was slipped under the door. "Stop searching or you'll regret it." Laura sobbed, admitting she'd received similar threats for years. She pleaded with me to leave, but I was too hooked. I had to know who was after us. The threats escalated. The black sedan followed us to the grocery store, and one night, Laura's tires were slashed, a new note left, "Last chance." I saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear that had driven her to give me up. We packed a suitcase, grabbing only essentials, clothes, her journal, my laptop, and rented a car under a fake name from a shady dealer in town. We drove through the night, heading to a remote motel in Arizona, the desert stretching endlessly under a moonless sky. Laura clutched my hand, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Mia. I thought I'd protected you." But the escape didn't silence the past. In the motel room, with its flickering neon sign and stained carpet, I heard the whispers again, now a voice in my dreams, deep and urgent, "You can't run from me." I woke in a cold sweat, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if it was Daniel, or someone else. Laura admitted she'd seen him once years ago, a fleeting glimpse in a crowd, but she'd never been sure. The mystery deepened, and I felt the weight of a danger I couldn't yet name. In Arizona, I hired a private investigator, Mark, a gruff man with a scarred cheek and a knack for digging up secrets. He started tracing Daniel's past, unearthing records of a man matching his description, arrested in Denver for smuggling in the late 90s, released on a technicality. Mark found a death certificate. Daniel had died in a car accident a year after my birth, his car found burned out on a lonely highway. But a witness report claimed Daniel stumbled from the wreckage, alive, before vanishing into the night. My pulse quickened. Was he still out there? Laura and I drove to the crash site, a desolate stretch of Route 70 outside Denver, the wind whistling through the sagebrush. The air felt thick, almost alive, and I swore I heard that voice again, whispering my name from the shadows. We searched the area, our shoes crunching on gravel, and found a rusted locket half buried in the dirt, engraved D and L, Daniel and Laura. Inside was a faded photo of a baby, me, with Laura's eyes. She wept, clutching it to her chest, but I felt a chill. If Daniel survived, where was he? That night, at the motel, the phone rang. I answered, hearing only heavy breathing, a low growl, then silence. I hung up, my skin crawling, sensing eyes on me even in the desert. Mark's next call brought a breakthrough, a name, Victor Russo, a retired crime boss from Denver, once Daniel's superior. Mark suspected Victor was behind the threats, tying up loose ends from Daniel's betrayal. I was obsessed, determined to face him. Against Laura's tearful pleas, I drove to Victor's gated estate in Nevada, a sprawling mansion with manicured lawns and armed guards at the entrance. My heart hammered as I slipped through a side gate, the gravel crunching under my sneakers. Victor was in his study, an older man with silver hair and cold, piercing eyes. He leaned back in his leather chair, smirking. "Daniel was a fool," he said. "He thought he could run. I let him go, until you started digging." He denied current threats, claiming he'd moved on, but his gaze lingered too long. As I left, I spotted the black sedan again, parked near the gate. That night, back at the motel, I found a photo under my door, me and Laura at the crash site, taken hours ago. The voice in my dreams grew clearer, "He's closer than you think," and I realized the danger was closing in. I rushed back to Laura, my mind racing. Mark called with a bombshell. Daniel's death certificate was forged. He'd faked his death to escape the syndicate, adopting a new identity and vanishing. Mark traced him to Seattle, my city. My breath caught. The man in the coffee shop photo, the whispers, the threats, it all clicked. I dug through my camera roll, zooming in on that blurry figure from months ago. The jawline, the posture. It was Daniel, my father, alive and watching me. Laura was stunned, her hands trembling as we pieced it together. Daniel had been tracking me, perhaps to protect me, but his presence had alerted the syndicate. The whispers weren't hallucinations, they were his voice, warning me through the years. I felt a mix of rage and longing, betrayed he'd stayed silent yet desperate to see him. I wrote a note. Dad, I know you're out there. Meet me at Pike Place Market, tomorrow, 10 a.m. I left it at the coffee shop, my heart pounding, hoping he'd come. The next morning, I stood at Pike Place Market, the crowd buzzing around me, fishmongers shouting, tourists snapping photos. A man approached, tall, with graying hair and my dark eyes, his face weathered but familiar. "Mia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. It was Daniel. He pulled me into a hug, and I felt tears sting my eyes. He explained everything. After faking his death, he'd lived under a new name, watching me from afar, school plays, graduations, unable to risk contact. When I found Laura, the syndicate noticed, forcing him to stay hidden. The whispers were his, a desperate attempt to warn me without exposing himself. Laura joined us, and we sat on a bench, the market's chaos fading as we talked. Daniel apologized, his voice breaking, and handed me a worn journal, his life story, including a page about me, scribbled with love. The syndicate threat ended when Mark tipped off the FBI, leading to Victor's arrest for old crimes. But the whispers linger, faint in the wind, a ghostly echo of the past. I'm rebuilding with Laura and Daniel, learning to trust again, but I keep my windows locked, wondering if the shadows still hold secrets.